Wellness, Health and Mind's bi-weekly wellness podcast where we discuss wellness through the lenses of mindfulness, mental health, nutrition, sleep, exercise, and healthy relationships. We're stoked you're with us today as we meet with Jake and Colin of the Peavey Project. We'd like to remind you that you can learn more about the 6 tenets of wellness and how to get connected with us here at Health and Mind by clicking the link in the show notes. Jake and Colin, thank you guys for being here today.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
That was
Absolutely.
great. It was great.
Cool. So to get started, how did this project come about, and what does the project aim to do?
Sure. So the goal, or this really started probably in like 2015, and that's where Colin, Alex Peavey, and I, all of our paths kind of collided. And so Alex Peavey is one of the best mindfulness teachers, certainly in this area, and certainly that we know. And we had a chance just to follow him along and observe really just this amazing skill set he has, and his his ability to take something that's otherwise maybe a little fluffy and make it so tangible. So he was such just a mentor for us. He was like a magnet. We just kind of kept getting pulled in and just were sponges of all that he did for years, working with students, working with student athletes. And in 2017, he was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer. And in 2020, he was diagnosed with another stage 4 cancer. And so he is battling, and it's in 2015, it's interesting, we see him teach mindfulness, and we were a little bit aware of this to students as to like a skill that you can use if you're nervous before a test, or if you're nervous before a game. And now he's showing us the extent to which this practice can be brought to life. And so as he's battling these immense challenges, he's showing us what it means, and he's being super intentional, super mindful of like, how do I want to respond to these circumstances? And his big things are fight and smile, which we'll talk a little bit more about. That's kind of our tagline, and choose joy, right? We kind of haven't, we can't always control our circumstances. We can always control our response. That's really the foundation of the Peavey Project. And our mission is to pass forward his legacy, honor him, and pass on some of these lessons that he's shared with us, so that we've kind of accrued over our journey. And so we work, really, it's kind of a three-legged stool. We work with corporate groups to serve employee wellness. We also work with teams and student athletes, and then we also work with community champions. So those are teachers, police officers, people that are kind of just busting their butts for others. We want to make sure that, especially over the past few years, they've exhausted themselves. We want to be a fuel source for them. Colin, would you add anything?
No, he hit it on the head. And just so most folks know, we are based out of Richmond, Virginia. Alex is now the mindfulness coach at VCU with the Rams men's basketball team. And yeah, we have a lot of sports in our background here. Jake played lacrosse at Hampton Sydney. I played football at the University of Richmond. So when we got together, it was basketball, football, lacrosse. How can we go out and continue to serve the world, and kind of spread the power of mindfulness? So everything good you hear that's coming of us, we go back to Alex and say it's because of that guy right there.
Yeah, he sounds like just a giant of a guy, somebody that really believes in this stuff and is now living it out in a really difficult circumstance. It's one thing to live it out on a day to day, but when you're going through something so difficult, he's using it to inspire you guys further, and it's really cool to hear. I'm wondering how your paths crossed originally in 2015. How'd you guys end up meeting, Alex?
Yeah, so Jake actually went to collegiate school. So we met at collegiate school in Richmond, Virginia, which is a private JK to 12 school. I got hired on at collegiate right when I finished up at the University of Richmond when I was working on my master's. Jake eventually came back to collegiate, and Jake and I worked in the summer programs office together. And while Alex was over counseling, coaching basketball, and doing some other things over there, so that's where we met. And Jake and I have always been just super passionate about performance in general, but neither one of us had a mindfulness background. I'd been introduced to meditation in college, but it was more like visualization. Hey, when you're going out on the field, this is, let's visualize you making plays during the games. It wasn't mindfulness per se. There was a lot of striving with the meditation, as I like to say, like, I'm doing this to make me better and to move forward. So we got connected at collegiate, and Alex was teaching mindfulness. He had a senior seminar class called Mindful Leadership. And when Jake and I had the chance to, we'd go over and sit in class with him, help him teach some little segments because some of it was about performance. We weren't necessarily the mindfulness experts at that time, but we just kind of linked up, and Jake and I then started, we're like, we want to do this down the road. We know we're not ready to do it right now. What do we need to do to make sure that in, 5 to 10 years, we're ready to be really good at teaching this as well? And he kind of sent us on this path. He sent us a list of like, if you can get certified and take these classes, these are what I would do. And Jake and I literally started at the top and worked through the bottom. He was like, dudes, I threw out like, the whole kitchen sink and you guys are knocking them out. I haven't even taken half of those, but we just, we were so passionate about seeing what he was doing and the impact he was having. And we were seeing how it was translating onto the football field for me and into the weight room as I was coaching, and for Jake on the lacrosse field, the football field, and just how we were showing up and interacting with people. And it was like, man, this is something special. This is something important. And this is something that the world needs now more than ever. In collegiate school, it is a wonderful, trust me, JK to 12 private school in Richmond, an awesome education. But like any school, right, you've got a lot of students who are high performers, who are stressed out, who are asked to do a lot of things. The teachers and coaches are asked to do a lot. So we're like, man, how do we bring this and implement this into our community even more? And then we kind of got pulled outside of the community where folks realized we were doing it. And we all have worked at a place called Summit Emotional Health as well. And that is a holistic emotional health clinic where they've got mindfulness coaches, they've got psychologists, psychiatrists, family therapists, all in the same place. So we kind of got linked up through Summit as well, where we've been able to go out and expand this into the community. So a lot of connections, but once we kind of formed, it was like, hey, this is going to be a team that's going to be together for a really long time.
That's great, man. It seems so multifaceted to me, y'all's journey as athletes, and then bringing in the mindfulness. And as you mentioned, Colin, there's this striving about sports. You want to be the best, and your mindset is, depending on the sport, maybe it's usually aggressive. Like, I want to go out and get this thing, and you're preoccupied with a goal. Whereas mindfulness, I mean, some might argue it's at cross purposes. Maybe you wouldn't. I'm curious how mindfulness was integrated into y'all's view of sports performance, especially with those aspects that might seem like they might be at cross purposes.
Yeah, go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, so I would say, and you see this a lot with the groups that we work with, but there's a lot of like 100% of the time, right? And what we've learned over the past few years is that that's not a sustainable process. Like, it might generate short-term results and it might give us the indication that's like, this is the way. What we're learning is like, you also just defined burnout, right? Because some of us are at 70%, some of us are at 80%. And if I'm consistently giving more than I have, that's stress that's stacking on top of itself. And then it becomes burnout. So we view this as like a really awesome counterbalance to take this competitive drive that we all have and really make it sustainable. And the goal isn't to be, 100% all the time, but if we can be 1% better, right? If I can compete and give everything I have, let's say I'm 70%, let's give every ounce of that 70% to a purpose that's greater than me, and do so with a sense of focus and a sense of joy. And let's see what happens. And that's what allows competition to become, one, enjoyable, right? That's kind of important. Life is meant to be enjoyed, we think. But also the results come by this focus on the process. Right. And so the more we're able to focus on the process, have fun in the process, and set to these really 1% doesn't shock tension into the body, right? It seems feasible. We can do that. And so that's really the goal, is sustainable excellence. It's a counterbalance that allows this competitive drive to carry on for years and throughout our lives. And that's kind of the mesh point that we found, where it's like, oh man, this fits great. So a lot of the people we work with are student athletes or are really competitive professionals. Or maybe dwelling in really an outcome-based environment where we're judged solely by outcomes. And we can't always control that, but we can always control our approach or our response. And that's where this kind of blends nicely into the world of competition, we think.
Absolutely. And Henry, what I'll add there is Jake hit a lot on the process over the outcome. We get so, and this is kind of, we call it a Peaveyism, just a lot of what Alex says. So many folks are focused, and especially with sports, on the outcome. And as he likes to say, the outcome is when the game's over. You can't impact that moment. Let's say you're playing in a 60-minute game. That's that 1 second when the game's over. You don't even control that. If that's what you're focused on, that's just leading to stress. How about we focus on every second in those 60 minutes that actually leads to the outcome that you want? And when we have the ability to focus on each second, we're the best version of ourselves as a player, but we're the best version of ourselves for our teammates around us, and that ultimately leads to the outcomes. And what we heard, this wonderful saying that we've been given to folks for probably the past 6 months here, is when you focus on the outcome or when you focus on winning, the byproduct is stress. But when you focus on giving it everything you have in the moment, the byproduct is often winning. And it's the same thing in the classroom for our students. When you focus on getting A's, the byproduct is stress. There's nothing I can do. That's nothing tangible to get me to getting an A. I'm just focused on getting an A. But when I focus on studying hard and working hard in each and every moment, the byproduct often becomes A's or the best grades that I can get. So it's just a mindset of I'm no longer focused on this outcome, this thing I can't work on and control, but let me focus on each moment and each process that gets me where I want to be. Because when we're in each moment, all right, we can give it everything we have. As Jake said, if I've only got 80%, I can be aware that I can only give it 80%. But when I'm in each moment, that's where joy exists. When I start getting into these future moments of this outcome, I need this, that's where anxiety starts to show up. So when we can bring it back to the moment, we can experience joy and be the best version of ourselves for ourselves and those around us.
Wow. I believe that's true. In my experience with meditation, I realize, whoa, you were really striving. And now you're just here in this moment. And life's fine. Life's really good in this moment.
Absolutely.
I feel as if this philosophy you guys are speaking about is true intuitively. And we all know that it's more about how you play the game and your enjoyment of life than it is just small goal, winning the game, right? But acting it out seems to be a really big challenge for people. How do y'all teach people to practice this?
We got to acknowledge that it's hard. It's really simple, right? It's really simple. So, hopefully we're gonna aim for 12 minutes a day, and that can be 6 minutes in the morning, 6 minutes at night. That can be 1 minute, 12 different times in the day, but 12 minutes is kind of the sweet spot. And the goal is to focus on one singular thing, and as the attention inevitably wanders, we just notice it and gracefully refocus our attention on that one thing, right? But what we like to address, especially as we work with groups that are just getting their practice going, is that there are really these invisible hurdles that are in our way. And so the reason you see mindfulness, and you can't walk through the grocery store without seeing a magazine that says this, but you also don't have to look very hard to see people losing their minds, people's stress response constantly going off either. And the reason in these kind of invisible hurdles are we've got 60 to 70,000 thoughts per day. We all suffer from what's called a negativity bias, where we experience our life through a negative lens on a 5-to-1 ratio, right? We're all interacting with technology. That's how we're connecting right now, but it kind of has a dark side, right? Where it's either we're using technology as a tool for our benefit, or technology is using us as a tool for its benefit, right? And we're also in these it's called these VUCA times, where it's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So you put all of these things together, we're all kind of starting from a place of suffering. It's really hard. And so to allow that and to acknowledge that allows us to be a little bit more graceful. And what we said, I worked with a bunch of 8th graders a few days ago, and we talked about it's about progression and not perfection, right? And so knowing that it's hard allows us to be like, okay, I'm about to do something challenging. Like, let's see if I can do this. It's not like I need to be doing this and I should be doing more. So we talk about the approach first. We acknowledge the challenges. We also acknowledge the benefits. On days where you're like, I don't want to practice, why would I be doing this? Well, it's been scientifically proven to enhance our focus. It's been scientifically proven to decrease stress, anxiety, improve our sleep, improve immune function, right? Make us more resilient. And so it's with that we try to at least set the foundation to be like, this is what it is. These are their challenges. These are the benefits. Now let's try. And our goal is really to take a relationship approach, right? It's when you're treated like a subscriber, it's really easy to lose interest. When you're treated like a person, it's a lot easier to work through those kind of small, really predictable potholes that we can fall into right out of the gates. Some people are like, they try Insight Timer and they're like, this isn't for me. For us, we're like, Yeah, maybe the breath practice isn't for you. Let's try a body scan, or let's try a gata, where we kind of link our attention to this, words and breath, or a walking meditation, right? And so for us, it's all about kind of matching up tools with people, and just taking a patient process, right? That's kind of our approach.
And Henry, the last thing I'll add is you guys hit it on the head. For me, the neuroscience sells it. Like when I learned about the neuroscience that's been done over the past 20 to 30 years, like I'm a strength coach by trade as well. I'm like, done, done. You just told me that I'm getting reps for my brain and I'm literally rewiring my brain to be here in the present moment that allows me to experience all the benefits that Jake talked about. Like we also link that in because to your guys' point, you speak to the big six, right? All right, we speak to the big four. That's the first thing we talk about. We talk about sleep, exercise, nutrition, and mindfulness. Folks know the first three really well, right? They know why they need to sleep because there's so much science out there that's showing why. They know why they need to exercise. They know the importance of nutrition. Mindfulness just isn't quite there yet, but what we know from the extent, but there's been 30 years, there's all kinds of beautiful research out there to explain, but we talk to them like, hey, our folks love to perform at a high level. They love to be healthy. And it's like, these three for us, it's the big four sleep, exercise, and nutrition are important. I'm going to show you why mindfulness is just important. You know why physically you need to take your body to the gym and need to exercise. All we're doing with mindfulness is taking our brain to the gym. And if you look at it, and we define it in different ways, but that is one of it, right? It's awareness training. Every time my attention wanders and I bring it back, I'm getting reps in the weight room for my brain, as we like to do it. As we define it kind of in that way, it's like, oh, that makes sense. And yes, I did practice for 3 minutes and I do feel calmer. I do feel more relaxed. So you want them to experience it and experience some of the awesome byproducts of meditating that can come after 3 minutes. But as Jake and I have said, since we all linked up with Alex and we've been together, mindfulness is mindfulness is mindfulness, but how do you build relationships and meet people where they're at? That is our goal. That is our simple goal. If you can't meet someone where they're at and help progress them, as Jake said, it's about progression, not perfection. And we believe relationships is the most important thing. Folks don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So that is our entire approach is we want to be there, we want to meet you where you're at, and then help you grow throughout this process. And we're just passionate. We know the benefits, right? All of us know the benefits. So how do we meet folks where they're at so that they can experience them as well? And kind of just you ultimately like you're changing the trajectory of your life. Jake likes to give this example. If you take off right from LA and you're supposed to go to DC, but you adjust by 2 degrees, where do you end up? Not DC, maybe New York, right? But think about your life from that standpoint. If I can adjust my life trajectory by simply 2 degrees by trusting this 1% process every day, man, we look very different in a year. We look really, really different in 5 years and completely different in 10 years. So that's kind of our approach to it, where we meet folks where they're at and then, help them progress.
I think that's really the sort of orientation you have to do the work y'all do. Because when someone has the experience, which by the way, it takes a lot to get someone to open themselves up to even have this experience, and then okay, you got it, bye. That's not going to work for a person. You really need to be in there reminding them, hey, remember these benefits. Let's practice this as a team, which is another thing you guys do. You teach this to a team. In my experience teaching mindfulness, I've had some great success showing it to people once or twice, people that I really care about in my life, and telling them about it. That's fine. But when I've had groups where we meet on a weekly basis and practice it
Yes.
together, it's really incredible to see how there's so much conscious and unconscious blockage to this idea. But once the walls start to come down and they see that
Oh,
other
yeah.
people are having very different experiences, and it's not a right or wrong, sort of something Jake was mentioning. Mindfulness is mindfulness, and people get there different ways. And so when you have a community that's just supporting mindfulness rather than it needs to be this certain way, the
Absolutely.
connections happen. And I'm curious about that. Why is there such a big resistance to these concepts in your guys' view, both unconsciously and consciously? It seems that even though we know the neuroscience and maybe we've even experienced the benefits, I personally find it harder to practice mindfulness than I do to go to the gym or to eat healthy.
Absolutely.
I wonder why that is.
Jake, I'll start with two really quick here, and then you follow up. Um, First and foremost, our society never says do less. Our society
Yeah.
always says do more.
Mhm.
And y'all tell me if it's different. Like I am involved in a lot of stuff, but I have never been told to do less. All right, it is like we judge, right? A lot of times, unfortunately, it's a quantity over quality approach, right? Are you doing more? Are you filling your free time to do more and more and more? Which just doesn't then allow the opportunity to sit, to meditate, to practice mindfulness. Because it's like if I'm sitting and meditating, I'm doing the exact opposite of what the world's telling me to do. So there's no way I can be successful. I don't have time for that. I've got to go do more and more and more and add more to my plate. So that's one that we've seen, but we also, and we see this so much, the world loves to wear stress like a badge of honor. Oh, I'm so stressed out. That means, right, I'm working hard and I'm really giving. I'm so stressed out. It's like, you don't want to be so stressed out. Like, that's not a good thing. Like, we don't perform at a high level when we're stressed and we're anxious. Like, we know that, right? We're literally shutting down parts of our brain that allow us to be present and perform at a high level. So you see those two things where it's like society, right, is not telling us to sit and practice and do these things. And then, Jake, I'll add one more and let you go. But the other one is, right, it's still pretty new. While it is expanding, this is still a pretty new concept, especially like in our country and the world that we're living in here in the United States. Um, and we've seen gyms, 24-hour gyms open for how many years, where that's kind of the thing. You don't quite see that with mindfulness right now. And there still is some stigma to practicing mindfulness and acknowledging that we're stressed, that we're anxious as humans, but we all are. And that varies per generation. So there are certain generations that are like stress, anxiety, that's normal. Fight through it, push through it, run through the brick wall and keep going. Like you're soft if you acknowledge that you're experiencing. It's like what we now know is like, no, we're not soft, we're humans. Like if we can bring some awareness to this and understand the common humanity, we can all live a happier, more joyful life. And also a byproduct that comes of that is we perform at a higher level.
Well said.
I mean, it's like that's it, and it's such a shift, though, right? And we're starting to see it in certain places in our culture, but we hope that that shift continues. And Jake, feel free to add some there as well.
Yeah, I'd say like, yeah, I think as Colin mentioned, we are breaking down that stigma. I think a lot of people's minds are so like a little bit fixed where it's like, well, that's not for me. I actually don't live on the side of a mountain and I don't wear loincloths every day. So like, that's just not for me. Right. And so I think there's probably some like misleading marketing where it's like, you don't have to be on a retreat. You don't have to be in some exotic place. You don't have to be Buddhist, right? Like there are a lot of these like, not stereotypes, but misconceptions, right? And so you start with a stigma that I think we're starting to kind of untangle a little bit. And then the next progression we see is the difference between reactive and proactive. You might see being like, oh man, when I get a few really good belly breaths, it helps me calm down. So when moments are really stressful, I can breathe into my belly, I can reset my central nervous system, and then, I can settle in. And so like I use mindfulness as an emergency tool. And what we're helping people, what we're helping guide people to is using this as a proactive tool. This is proactive resilience, right? You might not be really stressed. Cool. Let's see if we can get a few minutes in. You might have a crazy day. Cool. Let's get a few minutes in. And then if we're able to make it really a habit, right? And that's the game is like we meet with people ideally over 4 weeks at a minimum. A lot of our partners are like year-long partners, so we can help influence individuals, teams, and culture. But that's going to be the approach is like, let's see if we can start every day with a little bit of clarity, right? And so taking some time to invest in yourself. And I think that's a big distinction I like to make is like self-care is the idea, like you care for a crying child, you care for, a scabbed knee, right? This is a form of self-investment. You are putting time into yourself. So as opportunities arise or challenges arise, you've taken the time to be clear, right? I think that's the beauty. I think that's the unspoken benefit of mindfulness is another word for awareness is clarity. You can be really clear in chaotic moments or really cool opportunities, and then align your thoughts, words, and actions. Right. And that's where this becomes a superpower, and where it really becomes a tool for mastery and sustainable excellence, is like break down the stigma, understand the reactive benefits, and then let's see if we can shift to making this a proactive habit. And that's kind of the sweet spot. That's progression we like to help people through.
You guys got it. I mean, you've got the system, and I think about how we've all three of us have had our own journeys with mindfulness. And it's interesting, y'all have brought up the fact that the world is more anxiety provoking than ever right now. And, all you have to think about is what a cell phone is. Like, that's an infinite feedback loop of not being mindful, right? Just letting your mind
Absolutely.
kind of go. And what got me into mindfulness originally in college was feeling anxiety. I was anxious. I was so in my head. I couldn't listen to people when they were talking to me. I couldn't say what I really felt. It was just, I was constantly somewhere else. And when I discovered mindfulness, I got really into it because I realized how powerful it was immediately. It was, I was meditating for 20 minutes at a time. Looking back, maybe it wasn't needed so much, but it was such a great tool. And since then, it has become more of an emergency button that I hit. Okay, I'm stressed right now. Let me come into the present moment. Take 2 minutes, take 3 minutes. And now it's sort of something I use as a tool, not necessarily something I practice every day. And I assume y'all can think about that, through a lot of things in life. There's sort of an ebb and flow of how into something you are. But I'm curious about y'all's personal journey with mindfulness. How did it start, and what does the progression look like for y'all when it comes to discovering it, practicing it, integrating it into your life?
Yeah, I'll go first here. So I said I was introduced to meditation in college, not mindfulness necessarily. It was very much so this form of like visualization to help me be a better football player, the striving component to it. But I was already a striver. I didn't need another striving tool, and it became a striving tool. But the reality is, like, there was some of the natural byproduct of feeling calmer afterwards. Do I think it helped me on the field? Absolutely. Like, I am a big believer in visualization. I just wish I would have had the entire umbrella of mindfulness, the attitudes that you take with you, right? Of trust, patience, non striving, beginner's mind. But for me, and I'll tell you, this is kind of the common humanity that comes out. This is my personal story here. I lost my oldest brother, committed suicide when I was a junior in college. And for me, the only thing I knew was like, my brother's funeral was on Wednesday. I drove back Wednesday evening to school to be around teammates, to be back in the college setting, to take my exams, because that's what I knew was best. Let me get around my tribe again. And that's what we always talk about. That's capital T trauma, that experience. And then to see, my parents go through the experience as well of losing a son, it showed up for me probably 2 to 3 years later, whereas the same as you said, like, I was experiencing such anxiety, like there was something in me that I had not gotten out, and I didn't have a tool for it. And I was like, what in the world's going on? I've always been able to just rock and roll, go do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, performed at a high level in the classroom, on the playing field. But it was like eating at me. I mean, it was one of those things where it's like, just constant anxiety. And I met Alex, and it was after my college career where I was still like, I'm new into the working world. I met Alex, and I was going through this, and it was him. And I always say, like, he never will know the impact he had on me, but it was this mindfulness practice, along with like talking through like what had happened with a lot of folks, working with a therapist to talk through the situation, just because it was big. And I finally acknowledged that it was a really big event that I couldn't handle on my own. And I didn't want to talk to my parents and my family about it, because they already had plenty in their lives, right, going on. They were dealing with it. I needed to be strong, right? I had to be strong. I couldn't show that I was, experiencing what was going on. So mindfulness for me became this tool that was like, I can separate this claw of life is down on me right now, right? This is capital T trauma. I could create some space. And it was like, the anxiety isn't me, which I had kind of made it, and it was like overwhelming. It was like, I could create just a little space. and I could breathe a little bit more. And I was still functioning at a high level, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't very joyful. But then I created more space and more space and more space. And then I got to this place where it's like, I will never not have this practice in my life because I've always known the importance of the others, right? I'm a performance guy. I know the weight room and exercise. I know sleep. I know nutrition. Like, this has been the biggest building block for me that I wish I would have had when I was younger. It would have changed the trajectory of my life in so many different ways. And maybe not, like, I'd still maybe be here, but I wouldn't have to have gone through these little battles that I was constantly experiencing by myself without this help and this support. So that was my personal mindfulness journey. But through that process, right, I then take myself through all these certifications. Like, I can't keep this to myself. Like, I have to share this with the world. Like, that experience, as I look at it, like, it's made me a better person. Like, I sure as hell wish it would have never happened. Don't get me wrong, but have I learned from it? Has my family grown closer from it? And then I came to this practice, which we're now living and doing full time. And I can't tell you, we share with folks individually, teams, groups, whatever it is. It's the most rewarding thing I've done. You know, besides coaching out on a field, it has become the most rewarding thing I've done because I know I'm giving folks tools to help themselves out immediately. And it's like, man, I wish I would have had this then. I'm glad I met Alex. I'm glad I met Jake. I'm glad we're on this journey. So it's going to be a lifelong journey, right? We're going to be lifelong learners and continue, but that's kind of my personal story with it there. So yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'd say my story probably can begin post-college as well. So I remember playing lacrosse in college. There were some days where it was like really easy and I was kind of like, you know, experiencing that flow state where I was like a split second ahead of the game and I was loving it. Other days I felt like I was playing in sand and it was really brutal. And I remember always being kind of like confused by that of like, this just seems random. Some people are just dialed in, some people aren't. Like, this is a really sick and twisted random joke that someone is playing on us, right? And then I graduate, and at that time, like, I'd been a student athlete for like 15 years, so much of my identity was wrapped into that, and then it was gone, right? You graduate. And I took the first job I could, which was a sales job selling shipping. And it wasn't even like I was selling like second rate shipping through a brother company of UPS or something. I went like 3 for 3,000. I'm like door-to-door sales in my grandfather's suit that's been like tailored so it like looks kind of goofy. I'm knocking on doors and people are like, you need to get the hell out of here. And it was brutal. It was like very isolating. There was more failure than I'd ever like experienced in my life. Like, I had the good fortune of being a part of pretty successful experiences, and this was brutal. And so it really kind of inspired the sense of just like, it was depression, it was anxiety, I was down. I was like, when is this ever going to end, right? And I noticed, I was like, and in those moments, you reach out to people that you think can help. And so the first people I reached out to were my coaches. I was like, reach out to an old lacrosse coach, and he kind of provides some insights, some wisdom, some perspective. And I reached out to Alex, and that was huge. And he helped connect me to the Center for Sport Leadership. And I realized the two things that were missing for me that were creating such depression, such anxiety, were the sense of purpose. There was no purpose to what I was doing. Like, ship with UPS or FedEx, I don't care. And there was no passion, right? And there was no passion. The one thing I loved doing in that moment is I was a volunteer coach for a bunch of first graders. And I was living in Virginia Beach at the time. And I loved doing that. Like, that's when I felt most alive. And so I was like, okay, like, I love to get into this coaching piece. And then I get into grad school, and in grad school, you basically have some freedom to pick and choose what you want to go, you know, take a deep dive on. And I just always chose peak performance. And I think that's it, is like, I was so intrigued, right? I want to learn more. Like, how is this flow state trainable? Like, can we all get into this more frequently? And if I'm going to be coaching, can I help others get into this? And that's where kind of my curiosity sparked. I connected with Alex in 2015, took a few classes, and really started to understand of like, wow, like, I kind of like walked in butt first into mindfulness, where I was like, this is it. This is kind of what I'm looking for. This is the foundation that allows us to be in this zone where we're thinking, feeling, performing at our highest level. But from a mental health standpoint, I acknowledge where I was like, when depression does arise, when anxiety does arise, this is such a powerful tool, right? And so for me, like naturally being, a little ADHD, having, anxiety, depression, like those are genetic things. It's not a choice, but it's like acknowledging all of that. I was like, I immediately started noticing the person I was when I wasn't practicing, and I wasn't as patient. I wasn't as compassionate. My pause button wasn't as accessible between something happening and me doing something about it. And that awareness kind of 2015, 2016 was when I was like, okay, every morning before you do anything, let's practice. And now it's, 8 years later, it's just a daily practice. So now we've got 2 little kids. I'll wake up at 5, I'll do my practice, do some journaling, do some reading. And then, by the time the circus starts at 6:45, like I've already cared for me. Like bring it on. I can negotiate with our 2-year-old who is got a gigantic personality.
Oh, bless you. Yeah, man.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys. Really, really cool stories, and I love that there's it's all about changing your experience of life. Like we were all going through life at a certain capacity, and there was something about this practice that made life just better. And I noticed for me, I mentioned a minute ago that I don't have a consistent practice currently. But if I wake up not feeling great, I can go through the whole day not feeling great. Or if I take 10 minutes, my entire day is just different. I'm just more open to life. And, a metaphor that came to mind, Colin, when you were speaking was this idea of having your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time. That's how I feel when I don't get my mindfulness practice in.
Yeah.
So there's this feeling of integration when you're just in the present moment, and it does take practice. It's still something that I have trouble with the stigmas in my own head about it. Is it really worth the 10 minutes? I know it is. But I feel what you were bringing up about how, I could do this task. I could send this email. Those sorts of things crop up. And so I really appreciate that you both highlighted the importance of the consistency of it and how it's become part of your life. And that's how you really reap the benefits, right? You can do it once and maybe you feel better in that moment. But that's nothing compared to you doing it on a consistent basis, week after week, month after month. Hey guys, we had some technical difficulties during our interview, so we got cut off here. And then when we got back together, I was asking about the Peavey Project and a little bit more about Alex Peavey.
Henry, just from a where we're at with the Peavey Project standpoint, folks can visit our website at thepeaveyproject.org. We're on social media as well. Being mindfulness guys, we don't like staying on social media much, but we post when we have to. But we're not on there all the time, but we are doing better with that. As far as what we're doing currently, as Jake said, we've got kind of the three-prong approach that we're doing. We're working with corporate groups. We want to be able to go into corporations right now. A lot of folks are struggling, right? A lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. They're coming out of COVID. Some are still working from home. They're still coming in. We want to make sure we meet that need, the population, the needs of that population, and we hope to change cultures. We don't go in. We really try to avoid one-offs. And that's kind of our team approach as well. We go in and we want to meet with you. We ideally ask for 4 weeks. And over those 4 weeks, we have a nice 1-hour informational session. Then we follow back up on Friday with a check-in and a meditation to make sure we're creating space to develop a habit. Because ultimately, this is a habit. Just like exercising is a habit, and when you get into the rhythm, it feels really good. Sometimes it sucks at first, though, right? But you got to get over that bar and get going. And then you realize, like, hey, I haven't exercised lately. I haven't practiced lately. I feel off. I feel a little different right now. Oh, that's what happened. I hadn't been to the gym. I haven't meditated. We love for people to get to that place because like, man, I'm physically benefiting from what's going on here, and it gives you motivation to practice. So we've got the corporate groups where we go in. We also work with individuals and teams, being athletic teams. And the beauty of Zoom is, it was last month, we were in California one day working with a lacrosse team. We were in Maine the very next day. We're working with Christopher Newport Lacrosse in Virginia Beach. So we've really been able to kind of like spread our wings and work with a lot of teams there. And then the other piece is, we say community champions, but we work with other not-for-profits as well to offer these services as well. So we've done a handful of partnering in the area with some groups. It's a group called Up RVA in Richmond that's doing wonderful, wonderful things. One of our buddies, he's actually providing opportunities for folks coming out of underserved communities to have a private school education. And he is making sure all of that is going with 20 plus kids. It's absolutely ridiculous what he's doing, but we've come in to kind of partner with those guys to offer mindfulness services to their teachers, to the individuals. We're working with the group 804 Coaches for Change, which is just trying to like bring awareness to what's going on in the world this day and age. You know, we're connecting with those guys and looking to provide opportunities again to some underserved areas in the Richmond, Virginia area and on. So those are our three prongs. Our approach from a team setting is always, we want more contact hours. We want to build relationships. I want to know what's going on in your life, how I can meet you where you're at right now to help you go along. I want you to know that I'm here for you, I care about you, and that I'm not just coming to preach at you. I am living this same thing that you are going through. We all experience the same struggles. I was a Division I football player who won a national championship, was a team captain, had all American, had all kinds of success. But I experienced some emotional lows just like everyone else does. So that is our full team approach. Is we want to meet folks where they're at, multiple sessions, and build relationships. Jake, you want to add anything there before you get going with Alex?
No, I would say like for the next year, I'd say we maybe have like 1 or 2 more slots available just for like corporate groups. And that's it. Is like, I think initially when we started this, the culture we're living in is like, do more, right? You got to do more to be better, right? Our hope is that we be more so we can do better, right? And so that really making that shift in a quality over quantity approach has made it so it is a little bit counterintuitive, a little bit countercultural, where it's like, we're not selling printers. We don't want to have 1,000 clients. We would rather have like 4 partners and really connect on a year-long basis. And that's that sweet spot. So yeah, Colin hit it on the head. I think that's always our goal. That's our intention. And the work is so rewarding for us, especially. So yeah, we are just honored, grateful to do this. But yeah, a lot of it goes back to Alex. And any good thing you get from us is we are merely amplifiers or speakers from him. And so that is keeps us going. I think, what is it? When your purpose is greater than your pain, your purpose will always win. And our purpose is pretty damn strong with him. And so he continues to battle. I know fatigue is certainly on the forefront of like his top battles right now. But yeah, his approach and his thoughtfulness, his compassion is huge. So we had a really cool opportunity to do a bunch of interviews, and we're going to set up a virtual fundraiser later this spring. And we can send you the details on that, but we basically want to interview a ton of people. Tell us about Alex, tell us about mindfulness, tell us about the need. We're going to edit it all. We're going to put in a bunch of live music and just make it kind of an uplifting evening. But we interviewed all these people from like childhood friends to Mike Rhodes, who's the head coach of ECU basketball, and like everybody in between. And it was amazing to hear the different perspectives, but they all kind of said the same thing. And his ability to connect with you wherever you were. It's like, imagine you walk into a room, everybody's walking down a different path. Some of these paths are very clean, very clear, very easy. Some of them are tumultuous. It is raining sideways, it's thunderstorming, you got stuff flying at you, right? Regardless of where you are in your path, his willingness to stand next to you was unconditional. And I think that speaks to his like just general compassion. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter your story. It doesn't matter your path. He's willing to stand next to you, like just be present with you. And I think that sums it up pretty nicely. And his ability to be a positive impact for you in a way that makes you want to be better for others it's magic. It's almost magical, but it's just who he is, right? And so I think that's the approach of what we try to do, is if we can help others be their best for others, that's the game. And I think as we assess where we are as a society and as a world, where there's a little bit of a gap, right? And anything we can do to bridge that gap a little bit more, we want to be a part of that bridge building. So that's our goal. But again, the glue that holds us together is Alex, and our hope is to be kind of the mold that helps these bridges stay strong for a while.
Tell you what, you guys are just incredible models for the things you're doing. You can just tell with how you speak about Alex and how you speak about your mission and your personal experience. I can't think of better mindfulness coaches towards peak performance. It just all makes sense from your background, through your experience, through your passion for what you're doing. Um, Congratulations to you both for finding your way in a field that you feel is extremely impactful, but also you know it's impactful. It's not that you think it, right? You've lived it out, you've practiced it, and you're sharing it with others. And it was an honor to speak with both of you guys today. I wish we had some more time, but hopefully we can link up in the future. I'll leave your website in the show notes. Anything else you guys would like me to leave, maybe send it to me. I'll throw it in the show notes as well. But yeah, I'm gonna let you guys go because you got to go. And before I do that, I just want to say thank you to the WOW community for being with us today. Feel free to follow us on Spotify or Google Podcasts for more episodes. For questions, comments, or concerns, you can email us at intern@healthandmind.net. Lastly, don't forget to follow us on social media. We are on Instagram and Facebook at HIMRVA. And all you do, keep your health in mind. Guys, thank you so much. This was
Thank you, Andrew. This is
too
cool.
cool.